Namaste. Amen and blessed be. The title of this morning's sermon is a little bit unusual. If you're not familiar with it, the phrase, the banality of evil, is an idea that comes from a book by Hannah Arendt. The actual full title is Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil. Now, the book is this pretty thorough study of the actions and motivations of Adolf Eichmann, who was one of the key managers of the Nazi project of genocide. The banality of evil, this phrase that she created, refers partly to Eichmann's demeanor during his trial after the war. He didn't show any signs of guilt or of hatred, which is pretty bizarre. And he claimed that he didn't bear any responsibility for what had occurred under his watch. As he saw it, he was simply doing his job. Not only was he doing the job that he was paid for, he was also obeying the law of his country. What I've been pointing to most of this month is that, with rare exception, evil is not the fruit of some monster, a person that's fundamentally different from normal people. The evil perpetrated by Nazi criminals was more the fruit of banality, or maybe even stupidity, than it was fanaticism or hatred. In her book, this is what she's getting at with the banality of evil. She argued that Eichmann wasn't a fanatic or a sociopath, but an extremely average person who relied on following orders instead of thinking for himself. He was a career military man. He was more motivated by professional promotion than by ideology. It doesn't suggest that the actions that he took were ordinary. That's not what we're trying to say at all. Nor is it to suggest that Eichmann wasn't responsible for the horrendous crimes he perpetrated. Recognizing the banality of evil doesn't let anyone off the hook, even under totalitarian political leadership. He voluntarily did what he did. It doesn't say that no one is to blame, but the banality of evil suggests that willful denial of the circumstances, or even stupidity, blindly following orders and claiming to do one's job, is fertile ground for evil to take hold. It's a warning to us all that doing your job, or following the law, or doing the same thing that everyone else doesn't let us off the hook. We are still morally responsible for our actions. Now, to better understand the banality of evil, I want to look at two stories that are going on today. They tell two very different stories of how we might respond to the world around us, how we might engage with the banality of evil. The first one comes from my home state, beloved Oklahoma. Some of you may have been following this story as it has unfolded in the news nationally now. But State Representative Dan Fisher presented a bill that would ban AP United States history from public schools throughout the state. The bill would remove state funding from supporting the curriculum because, as this legislature later sees it, AP American history courses emphasize what is bad about America. And the class doesn't emphasize enough the idea of American exceptionalism. Now, this legislator, Dan Fisher, is an ordained Baptist minister. He frequently delivers presentations in this historic Civil War uniform about the role that clergy play in the war, And he argues often and loudly that Christianity rests at the core of American identity. It's a bizarre scenario. The piece of legislation that he wrote was House Bill 1380. It was approved by the Common Education Committee of the state by an 11-4 vote. The vast majority of this education committee thought the bill merited further conversation and moving on to the state legislature for a vote. But a wave of outcry since then has encouraged him to pull that bill off the table. So at this point today, as we speak, the original author of that bill and the state superintendent of education are working together to reword the bill because they think that its vague language is what led to the misunderstanding and why it was not passed. Now, I'm not calling this bill evil, but I will say that this sort of willful ignorance paves the way for the banality of evil. Turning a blind eye to what we're capable of, or even worse, turning a blind eye to what our community has actually perpetrated, invites evil to repeat itself. The bill aimed at removing AP American history because it didn't adequately emphasize American exceptionalism. Now, this is a detail, but I think it's important as we're talking about the banality of evil. American exceptionalism is this fascinating piece of political theory that argues that our country is qualitatively different because of its origins. It is fundamentally different from any other country on earth, and some take it far enough to say that the forces of history play out in our context differently because of our different origin. This is American exceptionalism. This is what that legislator believes should be at the heart of American history classes for our children. Again, I'll say I don't believe that that piece of legislation is evil, but turning a blind eye to what we are capable of, or worse, turning a blind eye to what our community has actually done, invites evil to repeat itself. Now, there's a counterpoint to this story, fortunately, that I also want to share. It's a story that one of our members shared with me recently. The problem of evil is something that he's taken very seriously, and seeing the amount of suffering in the world, particularly the actions that some humans have perpetrated against others, has really shaken his faith in God to a fundamental core level. Like many people, the Holocaust was the premier example of horrendous evil in our world and the profound source of doubt in the existence of God. But hearing a rabbi discuss his interpretation of the Holocaust recast that event in a different light for Glenn. A few years ago, Glenn told me he was moderating an interfaith panel, and a question arose from the audience about the Holocaust. So Glenn directed this question toward the rabbi on the panel, and the rabbi replied with great clarity. He said, "The Holocaust tells me of what I am capable." This is an unusual Jewish interpretation of the Holocaust, but an incredibly powerful one. The rabbi said, "The Holocaust tells me of what I am capable." For Glenn, the shift of applying lessons of experience demonstrated a powerful generosity of human spirit, and it shed new light on the sort of meaning of the Holocaust. In Glenn's own words, he wrote, "The ability of these Jewish witnesses to find transformative value in the worst in humanity forced me to ask if the Holocaust was the clincher case against God. My belief was not restored, but the basis of my unbelief had been shaken. Now, no generosity of spirit is going to make the Holocaust go away, but opening our eyes to the potential for evil in our lives, opening our hearts to learn from the past, is how we might best guard against the banality of evil in our world. And demonstrating that openness to others, leading with our heart, is a real and a powerful response in our fearful world. Whether it's through the Holocaust or through the web of corporate greed that ensnares our daily lives, whether it's military personnel just doing their job or turning a blind eye to injustice, the banality of evil is real and it's incredibly powerful. So how do we respond? How might we guard against the banality of evil in our own lives? Now, all this month, I've had conversations about evil over and over again. The topic of ISIS has been mentioned, along with the Holocaust. I've discussed corporate greed, U.S. military torture, weapons of mass destruction, beheadings, school shootings, terrorist attacks. It's been quite a delightful month of conversation. And in our conversation about evil, there seems to be this sense of outrage. And it's not just this month. I don't even think it's just here at Tapestry. Outrage seems to be the order of the day. Am I wrong, or do your Facebook feeds look like this as well? Be outraged at the opposing political party, at racism. Be outraged at environmental degradation. Can't you see that polar bear floating on the lone ice cap? Someone save him quick. Save the immigrants and people of color from police brutality. Save our democracy from corporate influence. Save our children from the measles. Be outraged. But I don't think that momentary outrage is an effective antidote to the banality of evil. In fact, I think it distracts us from paying careful and close attention to the way our everyday lives impact other people. Momentary outrage is not a sustainable or a productive response to evil in our world. So I'm wrapping up this month of evil in the most likely of places, on Walden Pond. In his short life, Henry David Thoreau witnessed and he warned against the banality of evil in his time here in the United States. He bridged Thomas Jefferson to Abraham Lincoln. He saw a whole lot of promises and ideology crafted in the United States. But those promises and ideals were empty for a lot of the people who lived on this continent. So he spoke out against the exploitation of Irish immigrants. He spoke out about the American Indians who had been driven further and further west. He railed against the way industrialization made the rich richer and continued to exploit the poor. And probably his most eloquent writings were in the rejection of slavery. Time and time again, Thoreau stood on the right side of social concerns. He was somehow awake in a world that seemed in many ways to be asleep to the reality of human suffering. Where did he wake up? How did he invite us also to be awake with him? By going into the woods for 2 years. For 2 years, he lived with excruciating deliberateness. He took a full account of every detail of his life. That was the primary project. Only then could he live deliberately I chose our reading today because it's an excerpt from Walden that beautifully describes this work of living deliberately. And what's remarkable to me is the number of verbs in that short reading and the intensity of those verbs. He says to front, learn, discover, to live deep and suck out the marrow of life, drive life into a corner and reduce it to its lowest terms, publish its meanness, know it by experience, give a true account. For Thoreau, living deliberately and being awake to the beauty and the potential evil around us requires a vigorous engagement with the world. It's not about a moment of outrage when we flip on our computer screen, but about paying careful attention to the life in our midst. It's about greeting new experience and new information with a fresh mind. Being awake is as simple as paying attention to the world around you. Not once when you first arrive, but every time you're there, to learn about it anew, over and over again. That's how we're called to attend to one another. We begin to see the particulars of another's life are similar to our own, and we find how we belong in relationship with one another. Thoreau would tell us, wake up. Open your eyes, listen, embrace. Because these seemingly insignificant details and forgettable details are the stuff of life. Notice and attend to the details of the people and the world around us in the most precious and powerful safeguard against the banality of evil there is. It's not about being outraged. It doesn't look like self-loathing and punishing ourselves either. It's simply being awake to our relationship. A part of me wonders, when is it enough? When have I done my part? What does it even look like or feel like? When do I get to rest and be comfortable with my life, with the knowledge that I'm living rightly? What does it look like to be awake enough? And I don't know what enough is, but I'm starting to think that this is the wrong question. Because the more awake we are, the more passionate we are about being awake. It's like the idea of giving, not until it hurts, but giving until it feels good. Let us awaken ourselves to the world around us, to be aware of the many death-dealing webs that might ensnare us, and keep our focus on the web of life that connects us, that calls us into new and deeper understanding. Amen.